Welcome to the show, everyone, to Profound States. And this is Derrel Sims. He's also called the AlienHunter. He works with HUFON, Houston UFO Network, in Houston, Texas. He is an abductee. At least I would call him that. He might call himself something different. He's been around this UFO field for a very long time, and he knows quite a bit. I guess that's a pretty good introduction. Welcome to tonight's show, Derrel.
Thank you. I enjoyed being here, Charles. I want to see what this is going to be like working with you. This is very exciting.
Well, so I guess we could just jump right into it. My first question for you would be, do you remember when we met?
That I don't right offhand. I had literally have since years ago probably have met nearly 20,000 people since then. I've been all over the world a half dozen times. Been to Japan 3 times. Lived in Korea for a year. Been to Turkey. Gosh, it could be 4 times now. I've got 2 back-to-back conferences coming up in Turkey alone, and my memory is I remember faces real well, but not necessarily names. That's the way it is.
Well, somebody said you would never forget me. I don't know how they would ever think such a thing, because nobody can remember everybody. But I think it must have been at a HUFON meeting, and you had, at that time, you had a very small box of implants. Today you have a very big box of implants.
That is true.
But back then it was fairly small, like the size of a shoebox. And you showed it to me, and you mentioned the glass or plastic one that, well, I shouldn't give too many details about it because I don't want to give away your little secret that you told me. You remember that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll leave that one as a secret.
Yes.
So, how many implants have you collected so far?
Well, it's a difficult answer to give to you, because everybody thinks just because you did 27 surgical interventions on people with alleged alien implants, that all of them were actual alien implants. That's just not the case. Some people's items were not implants, and we knew it when we went into the surgery. They were anomalous objects, but in my opinion, were not alien implants at all.
So how many implants have you removed that you feel are definitely real alien?
Probably about a dozen of them. Some of them we're still studying. We're literally an example. A little girl had. She told her mother that she had some little strange man with large black eyes put 4 little things, some little things in her nose. And her mother said, "What do I do?" And I said, "Well, have her sneeze into a Kleenex." And obviously this was not a surgical removal. So the lady sends me 4 of these objects, and they're about the size of a pinhead, and they're 4 little gold spheres. And the reason that's fascinating to me is because, is the story true or not? Well, you don't know. It's just a story until you get it. And whenever I got the objects, the first thing I did was contact a friend of mine, Dr. Nick Balakas at York University in Toronto, and I told him I wanted a metallurgist, literally a senior metallurgist, to look at these things, and he did. And the metallurgist looked at those and said, "Well, I don't think they're alien implants." I said, "I don't care what they are. I would just want to know. I just want you to tell me what's in them. What are they about?" And I don't know whether alien or not. That's someone's assumption. I don't know that to be true. I wasn't there, so I don't know. So anyway, long story short, is the metallurgist called me back in a week, and he said, I've not been able to reconstruct these pinhead-sized gold spheres, and I'm really confused by it. I'm rather shocked. And he said they're 49% gold and 51% silver. And I said, well, that's good to know. That's the first phase of what I wanted to know. He said, what do you think they did with these? What are these for? And that was just a kind of a shocker from him to go from the consummate skeptic to, what do you think they're doing with this stuff? How does this work? So I told him what I thought. I said, I'm guessing here because I don't know. Again, I wasn't there, so I didn't see them come out of anybody. So I don't know that to be true. So we explored those objects, and now this is fascinating because those particular objects that we've had looked at in at least 2 different laboratories alone, and something quite fascinating happened. Professor Avi Lieb at Harvard, he's quite famous for his declarations about possible alien spacecraft coming toward Earth in the form of meteorites. This week on TV, he made an astounding statement. He said, he said there was a meteorite that came into our atmosphere, and that meteorite exploded over Polynesia. And he said, I took a ship out there, and we made a skiff, like a drag skiff, 2 kilometers underwater, and I had magnets attached to it. And he said, we acquired these little tiny gold spheres from the bottom of the water. He said, none of this should, he said, it doesn't make sense. He said, although it was a meteorite, he said, in my opinion, we may be looking at an alien craft here, or something from an alien craft, not a meteorite. He said, first of all, the meteorite was far too fast coming in. And he explained a lot in detail. And of course, everybody had their eyebrows raised, like, well, this is crazy. The guy's brilliant. He's about 5 steps ahead of most people whenever he makes a statement, and it takes him several years to figure out where he's actually coming from. Anyway, I was fascinated looking at these gold spheres because they look almost identical to the ones in the little girl's nose. The reason that also was interest to me, because the first implant surgery that we did in Camarillo in 1995, the National Institute for Discovery Science, NIDS, contacted me with 18 of their scientists, and we did a presentation for them, and they wanted me to pick out several of our so-called implants and have them study them. And I said I would be glad to do that under the condition that it would be a double-blinded study. I don't want anybody knowing anything about anything when they're looking at it. So they agreed to this. They sent the objects to Los Alamos and New Mexico Tech for a qualitative and a quantitative analysis. Long story short is they did a really interesting study with a special microscope they constructed that had a little chamber on it, and inside the chamber they had the implants, and then they fired a laser at the implants, and it captured gases off of the implants and told a lot about what the implants actually contained and so on. A rather remarkable thing, but the fascinating thing about it, if you look at the extreme close-ups of the electron microscopy, there are these little spheres on these metal implants. And the metal implants, of course, were from here in this first surgery, were determined by Los Alamos, New Mexico Tech to be from the Yaocheng or the Widmanstatten structure meteorite. These are small 1/4-inch needle-like formations called lamellar projections from a rare meteorite. Of course, they want to know, where did you get them? They're very rare. Where did you get? You don't go find these. And of course, we did not tell them they were inside a human being's body, and that the biology was far more important, in my opinion, than the metal objects we found. But anyway, long story short, I was amazed that the metal spheres were found inside inside on the surface of these meteoric objects that we found installed in some human being's body. So again, here we have little metallic spheres from meteorites, and from two possible different meteorites, from Avi Lieb and also from our first surgery. And then this little girl comes up with these metal objects that are virtually identical to Avi Lieb's, and they look very much like it under electron microscopy. And I just find the whole thing fascinating. But again, the first implants we found from someone that we did the first two surgeries on turned out to be implants. But the other objects that we found in the little girl's nose, I don't know. I can't prove where they came from. Only the fascinating correlation of three different possible stories here since 1995 till literally this week with Avi Lieb's, the professor of Harvard's amazing discovery, dragging this skiff behind their ship and pulling up these little gold spheres. He calls them little gold marbles, spherules, and I just find it amazing. So I will contact him, and we'll put some of this together and see if there's any correlation between these three different stories.
So I assume hold on one second, let me turn down my light volume here. It's getting kind of bright in here. So I assume the first two implants you had removed, you're referring to implants that Dr. Lear removed, correct?
Well, that is not completely correct. Roger Lear was, when I first met him, was a total, he did not believe a word of this. He thought we were all nuts. And he said, those look like, in the x-rays, that looks like a surgical clip from an osteotomy. And I said, that's exactly what I told the client. The only problem is she's never had a surgery in her life. He said, well, that's really weird. And I said, that's the reason that I'm here. I said, these three objects are in her foot, and the other object is in a man's hand. So we got a GP, he got a GP, general practitioner, medical doctor, present to do the hand surgery. So that's how the three objects in the lady's foot and one in the man's hand. So the amazing thing about the two cases, the man and the woman, neither one of them knew each other, and they're both from Texas, one in Houston, one in Columbia, Texas. And the fascinating thing is and I've never told them this to this day, is the amazing correlation they have with each other, and yet they do not even know each other. So this was fascinating to me because the woman is an example described in great detail, the interior workings of the mechanics of the spaceship, and in a Moebius strip type configuration. And the man was telling me about these strange dreams he was having of these three intertwining Moebius strip type configurations. All the time, I never told any of them anything. I just kept listening to their stories and collating the information. And I found it rather fascinating. They finally met each other out in Camarillo, and they didn't particularly like each other or anything like that. So I found that whole thing fascinating, that they not only didn't know each other, but didn't really care for each other.
So let's jump from, I think he did 16 surgeries and 18 implants, and we're going to jump from implants to implants. So I know you had at least one, or did you have two in yourself?
Oh, and myself, I had one in a nasal passage.
So who removed your one?
I did. That was never removed. I was 16 years old when that happened. Excuse me. It was 1960, age 12. I was 12 years old when that happened. I was conscious during the event, and it was never removed. We didn't. One of the things the alien does with people is to tell them you will not remember. Those are programs. I call them apps. And in fact, when a presentation I'll be doing in Manchester in about 3 weeks, I will go through that in great detail and talk about what these little programs are. One of the programs that they install in people is a program. It's called "You Won't Remember," and most people don't. At best, they remember their captor, but not much anything more. So, and there's a whole process to that. We could spend an hour just on that alone. But so I didn't want to remember. My event started when I was 4 years old. So there are a series of incidents that happened between age 4 and age 17 where they ended violently. And
do you mind going
Mexico.
through the first one?
Well, the first one was simply I sensed something wrong in my room. And when I was 4, we lived in a very rural area in the middle of nowhere. And I was amazed because as I opened my eyes, I sat up in my bed and somebody was in my room walking toward the wall. That made no sense at all because we lived out in the middle of nowhere. Nobody would be around, and whoever it was skinny, had a large head, and there was an ambient light in my room from the well house, so I could see, the figure fairly easily. And as I thought to myself, who is that? And he's going to bump into the wall. I didn't know he was going to walk through the wall and all of that. So apparently he heard me say that in my mind because he turned around immediately. And it was the first time I had heard consciously a voice in my own head that wasn't my own. And it said, "It's awake." And I realized he's talking about me. This is really confusing to me as a 4-year-old. And so this character is communicating, and I'm not scared. I'm not afraid. I'm not frightened. I'm not anything. I'm just sitting there wondering what in the world is that. And as I look at him, and this was, of course, I didn't understand anything about biology at age 4, but I do now and have a lot better sense of what was going on. But basically what I saw was a being very skinny, taller than I was, and he had large black eyes that were perfectly round, not like the Hollywood elliptical eyes you see in the movies and that sort of thing. And he had a little slit for a mouth, little pinholes for a nose, no ears. And I'm just sitting there aghast, like, what's wrong with this guy? I can't figure out. I mean, we have ears. He doesn't have any. We have a nose. He didn't have a nose. And I look at him. He didn't have any clothes on. It's wintertime. It's cold. I've got my cover still wrapped partially around me and because it's freezing. And he hadn't got any clothes on. And as I look at him, we'll go from head on down. He's got no mammary glands. He's got no belly button. He's got no genitalia. And I can't figure out where's his TT. I mean, that's how little kids think and they observe, not like adults. So I'm at a complete loss. Now, as I look back at that event from now, of course, I realize if you don't have mammary glands and you don't suckle your young, obviously, and if you don't have genitalia, you don't procreate. So the question is, how did you get here? Well, apparently, for me, after all the years of research I've done, he appears to me that he was hatched, cloned, made, or manufactured. and that's his purpose, was to do his job, which was what he was doing. And I just didn't have a clue at that point what was going on. And at that point, his eyes began to make a little tiny movement I could see from the ambient light in the room. And his eyes began to move just a little bit. And I thought, I instantly was struck with enormous fear. Now, at 4 years old, there's just not a whole lot of things you have that kind of fear over because it's not normal. And at that point, he begins to move toward me. And at that point, I realized that there's something seriously wrong with this picture. And I couldn't understand what the fear was all about because I wasn't afraid 30 seconds ago. Why am I so terrified and paralyzed? And as he moved toward me, I fell back on the bed on my little cot, and I pushed so hard against the bed to get away from him that it pushed the little cot away from my bed, kind of a V-like formation, and the top half of me, my head bounced off the floor, and now I'm in the corner of the room with my head off the floor and the covers wrapped around me, and it's the kid's worst nightmare. He can't get to me normally by crawling across the bed and get to me because I'm now on the floor. Half of me is. So he gets under the bed, lifts up the covers like this, and sticks his large bulbous head with those huge black eyes right next to my face. And he conveys an image to me of a clown, a horrific white-faced clown. And I kept shaking my little head back and forth, no, 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 because I want to remember him for what he was, not for what he wanted me to think he was. And he was trying to convey to me that I had a bad dream of a clown. And some people say, no, he was shape-shifting. I said, no, I know what shape-shifting is, and you don't have a clue. You weren't there. You don't know. He was altering my perception of him into that of a clown. And the fact was, when I kept shaking my head and popping myself back out, I kept seeing him for what he was, and there was no clown there. It was him. So anyway, the next thing I know, later, I was back in bed pushed back in its normal spot. And I'm so upset. In the morning, my parents are really upset, and they want to know what's wrong. And they think I've had a bad dream, because I knew that's what they were going to say. And I never would tell them. And again, the program that runs many abductees, you won't remember. I didn't want to remember. The fact is, your subconscious will often protect you. And I did remember him, but I did not remember a lot of the event. So I wouldn't tell them anything. And the weird thing is, that night they put me in bed with them, which is real unusual. I'd never slept with them before. But I was so distraught that they felt like I should be protected or something. And as I was laying in bed, and I told my mom this before she passed away this last year, and she said, Derrel, you couldn't remember all that. You were just a little boy. And I said, Mom, you sleep with your arm up over your head like this. And I said, Dad sleeps on his right side. And she said, how do you know all that? I said, because I was in bed that night. I know exactly how you sleep. And I said, that night, I sensed something wrong, and I popped my eyes open very quickly, and there's two of them at the end of my mom's and dad's bed. The one that got me the night before, and another one. Now, the amazing thing to me is I could recognize my guy, I call him our handler. If there were a million of them in a room, I could tell you exactly which one he is. You identify with him immediately. So they got me again that night. The next day, I'm out on the porch, and I stepped through the porch, and our porch was just being built. It was not very good wood, just used wood. And I stepped through it and broke, the little part of it broke. And I noticed on my shin, there was this huge scooped out area about 5/8 of an inch big. It's huge. And of course, when you're 4 years old, 5 years old at most, a 5/8 inch scoop mark on your leg looks like a crater on the moon. I mean, it's huge. And I am looking putting my finger in the hole there where the scoop was at, and I kept wondering, well, where's the scab? If you fall and hurt yourself, there's a scab. And of course, little kids pick at scabs, and I keep wondering, where's the scab? And as I put my finger in the hole of the scoop, again, I heard that voice in my head 2 nights before, the same voice saying, "You fell and hurt yourself." Well, I knew that wasn't me, and I don't have different voices in my head talking to me. So that wasn't my voice. And I thought it was amazing that as soon as I touched that place, that somebody was interested in me not remembering how I got injured, because they took a scoop out of me that night.
So the one up your nose is near your brain, yes?
That is correct. Behind the eye.
And so you just told me about one encounter, or was that 2?
Those are the first 2 encounters I had, age 4, and that the first encounter was age 4, and the next night they came again. Which is very unusual, and they left me with a scoop mark on my shin. And but at the time of the actual implant, I was age 12 in 1960 in Alamogordo, New Mexico.
So when you got the implant, was that your 3rd one, or was there some between those 2?
No, I had some other events in between.
So go through each of the events you had from the one you just told us, the first 2, and cover all the ones that, just go through
Sure.
each one as much as you'd like to go through.
So the next event was we moved to Mayhill, New Mexico, which is literally a wide place of road. And we were living in a basement of a church building until we got this parsonage built. And so there was an outdoor privy, or an outdoor outhouse, as some people would call it, a bathroom. And so I went out to use the bathroom that evening. And as I shut the door to the old outhouse, there was my captor standing there right behind the door.
And how old are you now?
I'm in 3rd grade at this point.
Which means you're 9 years old.
About 9 years old.
Okay, go ahead.
So I was just beyond stunned. And I wasn't gone for very long, because my parents would have definitely been looking. They'd had the police and everybody out looking for me, even though we're in a rural area. And that was on a Friday, and Friday night. The next day, I was out. I went out to play. I would always go fishing or play, or I loved insects and I loved biology, so I was out.
Before you go the next day, what happened when you saw
I didn't know a lot about that event at all, except what happened the next day.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
A lot about what that was. The next day, I was, like I say, I like animals. I rescued animals all my life, and I love insects. I like everything, spiders, all of it. Anyway, I'm pulling the heads off of dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of grasshoppers, which is not like me at all. That makes no sense. So as I'm doing this, I pick up another grasshopper, and I've got his head, and instead of pulling it off, I looked at his head and I got it real close to my eyes so I could see him very, very close, because I had excellent vision as a child. Anyway, and I looked and I realized, oh my gosh, it's the wrong insect. It was a praying mantis I was looking for.
And everybody in this community understands how the praying mantis are one of the abductors, but why did you have a deal with them?
My resentment toward the praying mantis, and again, the closest thing to it, the next day was a grasshopper. My resentment to the praying mantis, which was the image that I distinctly remembered at that point, I realized you're harming the wrong creatures here, you know, that you're leave the grasshoppers alone, so to speak. So at that point, I realized that that was my first introduction to a praying mantis. There are basically 7 flavors, as I call them, or 7 models of alien that show up in UFO phenomena that people describe. 2 of them are, one of them is a little gray guy. He's usually very short, diminutive. He can be as small as 18 inches to 3 feet tall. The next one is a taller gray-like being. And first of all, the small gray one, the one that picked me up in the beginning, they have an IQ of about 80. I mean, that's an IQ of a moron. They make huge mistakes. They make mistakes when they pick you up. Sometimes they put your clothes on inside out or backwards, something you would never do. Or they'll put you on the wrong bed or in the wrong location. They make huge mistakes. There's no question about that. But the second guy that you might see, some people often refer to as the doctor, and he's a gray-like being, same as the other one, but he's a lot smarter. His IQ is probably 135 to 140. He's a lot smarter than the other guy. And if there's any cutting or surgery or anything like that done on you or that sort of thing, usually he's the guy that's going to be doing it. The third kind of being is a praying mantis type beings. Usually they're about 7 foot tall. They can be smaller, but they're extremely intelligent, probably an IQ of about 170 to 180. Very, very intelligent. And usually they're the last person you get brought to, so to speak. They're very, very detailed. The next type of being that people report is a reptilian or a reptile type being, something you might see in a movie, a reptile being of some type, almost human-like, but it was a reptile. Then there's another being that people often refer to as a Nordic or a human-like being that show up with these aliens as well as some of these phenomena. The last being that I'll mention is, which a lot of people will contest, of course, but I don't care, because all I care about is the data. I don't care about the arguments of who likes who or who doesn't like who. And that's the Bigfoot. He will show up sometimes in abduction scenarios as well. And we've got him in numerous cases where he showed up actually in an abduction scenario with the other beings, all of them lined up in a row.
Did you make your connection to the praying mantis? Did you ever connect why you were angry at the praying mantis?
Oh yeah, I had enough kinesthetic memory to know that what was done was pretty horrific, and again, I didn't want to bring all that up back then. I mean, where in the world? Who would you go tell that to? Who would you go talk to?
But do you remember a praying mantis encounter?
I remember. Yes, I remember, because that
go through that one, please.
Well, I don't want to do that. There's two primary events I don't want to go into. That was one, and my last event had 5 beings that were not aliens. They were the ones, in my opinion, that made, hatched, cloned, made, or manufactured these aliens that we see. Everybody thinks, in my opinion, they tell me that these are 7 races of aliens we're talking about here. And I kind of laughed and I said, well, I don't think it is. I said, I think what we're looking at here is models. No, these are all different races. And I said, well, you have to think about this genetically just a little bit. If you look at them carefully, you'll see that the genetics of each of these beings all come from planet Earth. Why are you making them come from Zeta Reticuli or the moon or Venus or wherever you think they're from? I said, the fact is, if you look at the genetics of them, I'll give you an example. I said, I'm going to take a wild guess here, but whenever you see the so-called Nordic human-like being, where would you get Nordic DNA, I wonder? I'm going to take a wild guess. Norway, maybe? but that would be Earth, wouldn't it? Where would you get DNA from Bigfoot? I don't know. I'm going to take a wild guess, say probably planet Earth. We have a pretty good assortment of ape-like creatures you could do genetic engineering with right here. In fact, Dr. Melba Ketchum did genetic testing on the Bigfoot samples. I offered several of them myself, but she already had enough. And then she said they found that Bigfoot was in fact simian, an ape-like creature. Well, no shock about that. The second thing she found was that it had, you ready for this? The mitochondrial DNA of this being, this Bigfoot, was a modern human woman. How do you get an ape-like creature, 7, 8, 9 feet tall, mixed up with genetically with a modern human being woman? It's called transgenics. It's not that difficult to do if you know what you're doing. So there again, that brings us right back to planet Earth, doesn't it? Both DNAs come from here. And then you say, well, what about the reptile? Well, reptiles pretty much come from here too. Praying mantises tend to come from here. We got several hundred samples you can choose from if you like, if you want to modify something for your own purpose. And as I talked to my Native American buddy, Cliff Mahooty, before he passed away, I said, Cliff, talk to me about these gray beings. Well, they're the star people. And I said, don't talk to me like I'm white. You talk to white people that way. You don't treat me like that. You tell me the truth. He said, oh, those are the ant people. They come from inside the earth. I said, thank you. They come from here. I said, so all of them that I'm looking at, that I've done my studies on, every one of them, the DNA, you can tabulate it from right here. So why did they come from other planets? Well, because they said so. Well, so if that's like somebody lying to me for 25 years, and all of a sudden they come and tell me, oh, I came from Zeta Reticuli. Don't pay attention to this other stuff just because it looks like I come from Earth or my DNA is from here. So I had a few problems with that, and since then we've been able to get some DNA samples ourselves, and we're beginning to share these with some other researchers. And again, the DNA, based on everything I'm looking at, comes from here.
So I take it you have some Indian background.
That is correct.
Which tribe are you from?
Well, our enemies call us the Cherokee. They still do because they don't know what it means. But Cherokee was a term used by the other civilized tribes who said they call us the Cherokee. It means people who speak another speech. Anayunwiya or the Silagi or the generic term of most tribes call themselves the primary people or the principal people. They're the First Nations. They are the first. We're the big shots. We're the best people on the block, so to speak. So we are Algonquin stock coming from the north part of the country, and we came. Nobody knows why, but we came from all the way down from Algonquin stock down to the Carolinas and Georgia and spread all over the place, and we literally conquered the South, and that's why our enemies called us the Cherokee, those who speak another speech. We are not of their speeches at all.
So how did you learn your heritage?
Well, that's another story. In fact, I'm writing that part of as part of a book. But I was listening to this is kind of funny story. I was listening to some friends of mine. They were two white ladies were talking to this Cherokee. He was kind of a little local chief here in Houston of a little Cherokee band. And they were asking him, well, how do you know what tribe you're from among the Cherokee? And he said, well, no one can really know what tribe what clan they're from. There's 7 clans in the Cherokee: the potato, deer, wolf, and so on, blue. And anyway, I was sitting there whittling and listening to him tell these people, you can't know anything. And I thought, Man, you got to be as dumb as a bag of hammers to tell people stuff like that. I said, let me ask you a question. And he said, okay, Summerhawk, tell me, ask me your question. And I said, well, it's kind of a simple question. I said, I've chased 3 deer down in my lifetime and caught them. I can't outrun a deer. I think most people can understand that. But I chased 3 deer down in front of witnesses in every case and caught the deer. I'm just going to take a wild guess. You think it might be the deer clan I'm from? What do you think? And he said, well, that's a great piece of wisdom, Summerhawk. We're so glad to hear that from you. And I thought, you're the chief of whatever clan you're the wisdom of that group. I'm glad I don't belong to that bunch. You would stay in the dark ages of this guy. So anyway, then I've caught, that's not true. I've caught 4 deer since I've in front of witnesses, and the 5th deer chased me down and caught me. And again, in front of witnesses. This is all well substantiated. My point is simply that if you're from a particular tribe, if you've got anything going for you, don't you think your consciousness is going to show that to you in some way or another? I mean, duh.
So your experience with the praying mantis was so bad you do not wish to talk about it, correct?
Not necessarily. It was bad, but that's not the reason. I have other reasons. People always ask me, tell me about your last experience. And I said, 5 beings showed up in my room when I was 17 years old, and they weren't aliens. That's the important thing you need to know. Well, who were they? I said, well, they're part and parcel of those who hatched, made, cloned, or manufactured the beings we refer to as aliens. Well, you got to tell us. I said, no, I don't have to tell you anything. I said, the fact is, their reasons. I said, look, I'm an ex-cop. One of the things we do in police work is to keep back certain information about certain things we do in events. So for instance, like in a murder case. In a murder case, because you'll get people that'll call up, believe it or not, will call the police department and say, I did it. I stabbed that woman. Okay. How did you do it? And I stabbed her in the back. Okay. And they tell you this whole story, and you say left or right hand, and they'll tell you which hand it was. And you often know that they're wrong because of the way they describe the cuts, the way they describe the stabbing. There are people that admit to stuff that they never ever did, ever. They're wannabes. They want to be on TV. They want to be famous. And the fact is, the guy that stabbed the woman was left-handed, and this guy's right-handed. So he didn't do it. I mean, there's just a lot of telltale signs, and a lot of reasons that you keep and hold back information. I've done this since the 1980s, literally, especially on special cases, because later in life you find out there's a lot more information that comes to light that no one else knows, and they can't fabricate it because they don't know anything about it. So if they've had a real event identical to yours or whatever, or someone else's that you're studying, and I'll give you a case in point. Dr. Carla Turner, before she passed away in 1996, gave me a sample of evidence I still have, and she said, Derrel, this came from a woman who was sexually assaulted by a pig-like creature on board a craft. And I said, wow, okay. And she said, there was a witness. And I said, great. I said, did you have it analyzed? She said, yes. I gave it to a best friend of mine who was a forensic specialist, and he brought the sample back to me, shoved it in my hand, said, don't you ever bring anything like that to me again, ever. And he said, that compound cannot exist in that matrix. That's all I want to say, and don't ever do this again. And she said, I don't understand. I said, well, sweetie, I said, some of this stuff is so dangerous to own, have, or be in touch with that the wrong people will come calling. And you don't want that to happen. He's one of them. When you're a forensic specialist, let's say you get, quote unquote, some real alien evidence in your hand. Do you think people in the intelligence community might want to know that? That they might want to pay a visit to you and collect some of that? or interrogate you or put you on a watch list for the next 10 or 15 years? Of course they would. I said, he doesn't want that kind of trouble. I understand where he's coming from. I get that. So anyway, I've got the evidence, but anyway, a friend of mine, 20 years later, this is amazing. She comes to me and tells me about an event. She's a surgical nurse. She said, a couple of friends of mine, the whole family was experiencing abduction. They thought it was ghosts. They didn't know what it was. And there were illegal aliens in the.
Hold on a second. Hold on. I got to go to my door. I'll be back in 1 minute.
Okay.
All right. Sorry about that. It was just a package pickup. Sending back a computer to my company.
There you go. Well, basically, she it was rather amazing because she showed up at a support group meeting I was handling, and I don't know how she knew I was there, but she showed up and she said, I've got something I want to show you. And she gave me this incredible 8x10 color photographs of some alien beings. I looked at them and looked at her, and she said, I just want you to have those. And I said, thank you. I said, I didn't get you anything for Christmas. And she smiled and left. And we continued the meeting. Later, I contacted her and said, I want to know more about the story. And she said, okay. And she told me about the story. And she told me everything. And like many abductees you talk to, you don't get the whole story. You get pieces of it. Sometimes they forget. Sometimes they feel more comfortable not telling you, and so on and so on. But anyway, she told me the whole story, and I sensed that wasn't it, but it was enough of it. And then, so she says, I meet her later, and about 10 years later, and we start talking, and I'm at her home, and I said, let's talk about that case again. And she says, oh, okay, no problem. And she says, I said, that wasn't all that happened in that event, was it? Well, some of it was so weird, I didn't want to tell you because I think you'd think I was crazy. I said, young lady, I never think people are crazy. I just want to hear the information. It's just information. It is not a judgment about you. It's information. She said, well, there was this pig-like creature that came through the wall. And I remembered Dr. Carla Turner and her event where this lady was sexually assaulted by this pig-like creature and there was a witness, a man witnessed the whole thing. He came forward and admitted to it. And that's where I got the biological evidence from her on that event. I said, you're telling me that a pig-like creature, she said, well, like I said, it's so bizarre that I knew you wouldn't believe it. So I just didn't want to tell you. I said, sweetie, always tell Uncle Derrel everything. Don't hold anything back from me. I'm not judgmental. I won't judge you about it. That's not the way this thing works. So she told me the rest of the story, and I was amazed by it. But here you have two pig-like creatures now in two major cases. But no one ever told, only Carla Turner told the story because she didn't care. She's fearless, and that's what I admired about her. And she just flat tell you what she heard or what she thought. And this other lady kept the other information back for years because she didn't want anybody to know. So sometimes it's good to not tell people about the pig story because, like I said, later it showed up in the case anyway, independent. So she didn't know about any other pig-like creatures that showed up sexually assaulting people, sponsored by the alien. And sometimes that information is better left untouched until others come forward with it and they don't have a clue. By the same token, if you go out and tell everybody some of this anomalous information, something else also happens, and that's, and I've had that happen with me in my case with the last event when I was 17. I've had a number of people like on shows like yours call up and say, "Oh, Derrel, I know all about your event. You don't let me listen to me. I'll help you out here. Since you don't have a clue, I'll help you out." And I said, "Okay, help me out. I'm kind of slow here." And I'll say, there was this big long table and these long white-haired beings in white cloth, and they were all present. They're there. I said, "I've already seen the Star Trek version of that. Thank you. I don't need your assistance. You don't have a clue. You're guessing just like everybody else. I don't need your input. Thank you for trying to play with this. It didn't work." So, I've only met 8 people in all my 38 years of serious investigation, this phenomenon, that had that experience and it could describe those beings. Every one of those people have experienced severe trauma. Some of them are not doing real well and didn't do well after that. The point is that these are not the alien. They're the ones who made, hatched, cloned, and manufactured the alien. And if people can't get that or don't understand it or don't want to entertain that, it's okay with me. I don't care. The data is still there. It is what it is.
So how did you come to understand the 5 beings that were not alien that appeared to you? How did you come to understand they were the ones that created the alien? Is that okay for you to say that?
Well, it's okay to say it. The best answer I can give you from my perspective and from obviously a very close perspective is that there's a lot more I know about them and about other things that have happened since then. And there is a tremendous difference between the alien and them. They're as different as night and day. And the best way to describe the alien in the presence of these guys is terror. Absolute terror. And what I didn't know when I was 4 years old, 4.5, 5 years old, is that fear that came upon me was from the alien. He transferred the fear that he lives in to me. It's a controlled mechanism, to be sure, but it's like a drug for the alien to do this because it's the first time they get to live without fear in their life. And when they transfer that to a human being, they're out of that. It's like that pressure's off of you, so to speak. So it's a technique used by them, and it's an effective technique. Like I said, it's an excellent control mechanism, but it is just that. It's a mechanism. And people describe these as like all these and amazing powers they have over us and so on. We've actually tested and done things on the alien people can scarcely imagine. And the fact is, we found them, in some cases, more vulnerable than we are.
Okay. So do you have can you give a general description of these beings? Like, not necessarily a description of what they look like, but just as in, would you call them angels, or would you?
No, they're not like us. They're not like anything you've ever seen. There's nothing like them in UFO literature. That's not going to happen. I've been all over the internet. I've looked at all kinds of stuff, looked at everybody's drawings. I'll give you an example. I was at a conference in Los Angeles, excuse me. No, that's not true. It was in San Diego. And there was a guy there that avoided me for 3 days. I could spot these people for a mile. And he avoided me for 3 days. He would go to everybody's booth and things they had, but he'd walk way around me. And I thought, well, what in the world? I've seen this before. And so I want to see how this is going to play out. On the last day, just as I'm loading everything up, boxing everything up, he walks up and he's a black fella. He's a really muscled up, really good looking, strong. I mean, he looked like a gymnast or something. He's really well built. And he said, Mr. Sims? And I said, yes, sir. He said, I want to ask you a question. I said, yes, sir. He said, I'm going to draw something. I want you to tell me if you've ever seen this before. I said, yes, sir, please do. He starts drawing this entity. And he was shaking when he drew it. This is not the kind of guy that's looked like he's much afraid of anything to me. Anyway, I took the pen out of his hand and finished the drawing. Then he says, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And he ran away. He's one of the 8 people that have seen him. If you ever meet one of these guys, you're never going to forget him, because it's not going to be an abduction experience. It's not going to be a casual contact. It's not going to be an interplanetary Renaissance meeting. It's not going to be anything like that. They are, anyway, the point is 8 people I've seen that have met these 8 entities, they all have the same response, just like him. This is not something you want to.
So are you okay with describing what they look like or not?
No, I've never described them to anybody.
Okay, that's fine.
But the people that have described them to me have all been wrong, with the exception of these 8 people. But these 8 people are they're traumatized to even talk about it, and these clowns that make this stuff up or think they've had the interplanetary galactic meeting with the Great Council of the Wise, the Star Trek version of the people sitting at the big white table and all that, with like a bunch of Nordics or something. And it's really funny to listen to them. They talk about the Council of the Wise, and they have different names for them. I've met every one of these groups, from the literally the who are the aliens that are traveling around the Earth, in a gigantic spacecraft. There used to be a woman back in the 80s and 90s, and a blonde-haired woman. She was the galactic counselor, Earth counselor for them, and then later she was kicked out, and a Hispanic lady took over. And I met all these people personally, and it's really hilarious to listen to them. And especially when they tell me all about my stuff, and we know all about that. And I said, well, great. Then you'll be able to describe everything in detail. Please do. Fire away. Get going. And they're not even close. Why? Well, I'm sure this is it. I'm sure you're not correct. Nice try. Go apply that to someone else and see if it works. So anyway, that's not the way it happened. But the point is that, like I said, there are 8 other people that did meet them. And they didn't meet all of them. They met one. One's enough. You don't have to meet all 5. If you meet one, it's going to be sufficient. It will definitely ruin your day in ways you can scarcely imagine. You mean I'll be scared? No, no. It'll be much better than that. So anyway, the point is that was the last of my event, and events that happened to me there. The fascinating thing was, years later in Alamogordo, in Houston, Texas, we lived on a place called Rising Star, street, and I was eating. My daughter-in-law was at the house, and she said, "You need to write a book." And I said, "I'm working on it. I've got boxes full of stuff I need to work on." She said, "Well, may I help you sort it out?" And I said, "Sure." I'm going to grab my wife. We're going to go out to eat lunch. And she said, "Okay." And all of a sudden, my daughter-in-law is an abductee as well. She fled Brazil to get away from these guys, the alien. And she gets real nervous all of a sudden, which I've seen this before. It usually means that the aliens are near or they're close, that they may make an appearance soon. And she starts shaking. He said, "If you endorse go out to eat dinner, if you're going to go to a movie or anything, would you please call me and tell me? Let me know if you're not going to come back." And I said, "Of course, yeah, I would be glad to." So I went and picked up my wife from work, and then we stopped to get a little sandwich. We're sitting down eating these really nice tilapia sandwiches. And all of a sudden I looked at my wife and said, "Oh my God, they're at our house right now." And she said, "Who, what?" And I grabbed all the sandwiches, the papers are all wrapped in my arm, grabbed all of this off the table and grabbed it, ran to the car. She opened the car and I threw them all in her lap and I raced as fast as I could to get home. While I was on the way home, shortly after I left, a MIB showed up and she heard this knock on the door. She leaned forward to get up and there was a man in black standing there looking at her, and he kept telling her that it's okay. I want to show you something. And he's got a computer-like thing. She said, "It's kind of like a book." She said, "I don't know what it is," but she said, he kept telling me to keep looking at it, and I kept moving out of the way, and he kept moving, trying to not let me see the door. And finally, when he did get out of the way enough, I could see the bolt on the door was thrown. I realized he did not open the door and get in. You had locked the door on the way out. I remembered that. So we're racing home during this time, and he takes her, and next thing she remembers, she's laying on the couch, and they're trying to talk to her, get her to, he's trying to get her to allow him to remove an implant in my house. He wants it back. And she's like, what are you talking about? What implant? And long story short, she said, then someone else appeared and she described him in great detail. And I laughed and I said, only 2 people have ever described that being ever. And I said, and you're one of the 2. The other one's in Florida. And she said, who is he? And so I told her, and I said, anyway, long story short, those 2 beings were in the house and they were really leaning on her to let them remove an implant from her ear. And she kept saying no. And so they mimicked my son, who he was dating at the time. And they mimicked his voice. They mimicked everything about, even his cologne, everything. And tried to fool her to make her think that he was there and giving her permission. Go ahead and let them do what they need to do. Well, number one, if they're all powerful and they're all everything, why are they asking permission? Why do you need permission to do anything if you're in charge of everything and you're all super smart? Why is that? So that's another one of those interesting little parallels that shows up in some of these events. Anyway, she realizes they're lying to her, and finally, at this time, she said the taller guy that came in second told me, if you don't let him remove the implant, I'm going to destroy Derrel's son. And I said, well, they were probably just making that up. And of course, I knew they weren't. These guys don't joke about anything. There aren't any jokes. She said, no, all I know about him is when he says something, that's going to happen. And I knew they would destroy your son. And so I let him go ahead and do that. And In the presentation I'm going to do at in Manchester, I'm going to show an illustration of what they removed from her ear. It was biologic, it was alive, and it was about 6 inches long. Little tiny thing. But anyway, the point is that by the time I got to the door, opened the door as fast as I could, and she's walking around crying incoherently. They've already left. She said, they kept looking at the clock you got your wife when you went to France. And I said, yeah, I went up there. And she said, the big guy was looking at it all the time. He knew where you were at. He knew you were on the way here. I could sense his urgency for them to get it. I said, the big question to me is, if they're all powerful, all this, all everything, why are they worried about little Derrel getting to the house? Who cares? Trance them out or something, you know, do whatever you do. What is the problem? I says, none of that makes any sense when you analyze their tremendous power and ability, and yet all of a sudden they're actually worried about me showing up with my wife and 2 sandwiches. Give me a break. So anyway, she's wandering around incoherently, and she's got blood coming out of her ear. And I told my wife, take her in the bathroom and you search her from the bottom of her feet to everywhere. I want to know if there are any cuts on her anywhere. And of course, the only damage was in her ear there, where they had removed the implant itself. But again, my point being is that having not described these things to other people, especially to her is a good example. How could she describe this guy that only one other person's ever seen beside me in the whole history of, and I've been all over the world half a dozen times in lots of places, and I've heard tens of thousands of stories, and only 2 people have described this guy, because there's a particular reason for that, but they've only described him. And why is that? And if you told, I promise you, if I told and gave description and put it on the internet tomorrow, I'll get a 50 people by nightfall saying, oh yeah, I know all about that. Well, why didn't you tell me about it before? Because you didn't know. So there are people that make up stuff. They wannabes, they want to do this. That kind of destroys our information level. When you give that out and you say, well, you need to give it up for the betterment of mankind. Well, the only problem is the betterment of mankind. You get people destroying a lot of evidence by making stuff up. And then, of course, other people jump on that bandwagon. Yeah, me too. I'm sure I had the exact same experience. And if people have had these experiences, I promise you, they'll know about it. They will.
So the 5, was it 5 or 6 creatures that were?
There were 5 that showed up in my home.
5. Okay, so they scared everybody? Obviously, you said they traumatized 8 people that you met, right?
Well, those were different events. Now, in other words, these are people that met one of these beings at some point in their life. And I amazingly met up with these 8 people. The stories are just there. You couldn't make it up and make it work for me, because I only know the inside information on it. And for you to be able to do that and collate that and make it work with stuff that I never told anybody, you couldn't make it up and make it right. It never happened. But but there are other entities I was introduced to later as well, and that's 2 of them were the ones that showed up, the 2 that showed up in my home that removed the implant from my daughter-in-law's ear.
So the MIB, have you met any MIBs yourself?
I have. MIBs basically are, and again, I will put my spin on it, so to speak. These are genetically engineered beings for the purpose of, MIBs they're like problem solvers. When there is a problem the alien can't handle, a MIB will show up, and they will cure the problem. If you're the problem, they will fix you. They will make sure you're not the problem after that. when he showed up, he was able to, he was supposedly able to get the implant all by himself, but he wasn't able to do that. And then this other entity showed up that I had seen before, and she described him in detail. I laughed and laughed. I said, I said, you couldn't make it up, because he doesn't look like anything. There's not anything out there anyone's ever seen that looks like that. You couldn't make it up. And so anyway, the important thing is that she was right and correct. And the amazing thing is, the entity I saw, these other two people that report, I saw him before they were ever born. So there's no way that they got that from me or read it in some book. I've never reported it. I never put it out there. So that doesn't make any sense.
So have you, I suspect, based on things I've heard you say, that you've come to some conclusion of how you think all of this stuff fits together, and, all the layers and pieces, and, like a flow chart, or.
Well, I do. I'm actually working on another book right now that basically develops a taxonomy of all these different entities and their position in this gigantic cosmology, is basically what it is to me, and how it all fits from Earth and from the genetically modified beings here, these transgenics that we see, that we refer to as aliens. There are other entities as well, most of which have not been seen by a lot of people in the UFO community. They're also part and parcel to these events as well. Okay, I'll give you one last example. There was one of my senior investigators was working with a lady in our support group at the time, and absolutely a beautiful woman, just not pretty, beautiful, just beautiful. And I said, I want you to work with her, and he said, okay. And her events were so traumatic that whenever she would access any of that information or memory, in any sense of the word, she would often have to be taken by ambulance to the hospital. And in fact, her therapist had to show up with her, just in the event that type of event would happen. So anyway, they kept working with her, and finally my senior investigator called me and said, you need to come over, because I've done everything I can do and I don't know what else to do. And I said, okay. And I came over, and he sits like 8 or 9 feet away and does everything very methodically. And there was a clinical hypnotherapist and all that. And I walked over and sat down next to her, and the therapist sitting in the back of the room, standing out of the way. And I smiled and said, how you doing? She said, I'm just doing fine. I said, I'm not flirting. I'm just sitting here listening to you. And I picked up her arm and I held onto her arm. She said, okay. I said, I'm not flirting. She said, no, I don't think you are. And I said, okay. I said, I'm just listening to you. And we talked a little bit, and I said, so they tell me that you have these horrific events sometimes. And she said, you have no idea. I said, well, why don't you just tell me? Well, she said, I'm really ugly. I said, well, in case you haven't looked in the mirror lately, I think about 99% of the population of the earth would not agree with you. And she said, oh, but I am. And as she began to access one of these entities that I knew, her face contorted. Do you ever seen anybody ever grab hold of an electric wire? What it does to your muscles? How it contorts your face muscles to the point your muscle, you don't even look like who you are. That was the ugliest looking woman I ever saw in my entire life. Her muscles contorted to that state. And and I realized we met one of my guys. And so anyway, and she's in pain and everything, and her therapist got ready to call the ambulance. I just put my hand up, said, no, just stay there. Just let me handle it. I said, it's pretty bad. And she said, oh, God, it's so painful. I said, do you want me to make it go away? Please. I said, okay, I will. I said, there is anything they can do to us, we can't undo that they did. But you need to understand that. So long story short, resolved the issue. And she's just shocked. And I said, what's really important is that you learned a skill. Now we're going to practice the skill, and then we're going to master the skill. She said, what does that mean? I said, I don't want you to need me. I don't want you to ever need me again for any reason. I said, that's called good therapy where I come from. I said, I don't want you as a 10-year patient. I don't want to see you again except as a friend. I want your problems resolved. So anyway, we get past all that and into her event, and she begins to describe the entity. And the amazing thing about this is that part of this story happened on Skinwalker Ranch. They don't know that. I've never told any of them. But anyway, so she says, there's something there that looks like a desk. And I said, why would a desk be inside this place you're at? She said, I don't know. I've never seen it. There should be no desk there. I said, well, maybe the desk is just, it's just an image. She said, I don't know. Is there anything else there? She said, yeah, there's this file. I said, what do you mean? I said, I call it a file because I don't know what else to call it. I said, is there anything on it? She said, yes. There's a name on the outside of the file. I said, okay. You gotta understand, this woman does not know me. I met her one time. That's it. I don't know her from Adam. And I said, well, can you see the name? She says, yes. And I said, well, what does it say? She says, J.D. And I said, okay. She said, the weird thing about that, I don't think those are initials. I said, what do you think they are? She said, that's the name of this man. And I said, that's interesting. That's not initials. And she like Doctor of Jurisprudence or something. She said, no, that's a name. And I thought, oh, okay. And we talked for a little while longer, and she puts the file up and everything, and entity comes back in the room and so on. They do their thing. So I take her back to the event. I said, tell me about the name. I said, do you think he wanted you to see that file? She said, yes. Do you think that's the reason he left the room? Yes. What's so important about the name? She said, I have no clue. I don't know. I have no idea. I just don't know. She says, what do you think JD means? I said, well, I just have to tell you from my point of view, and I don't know if it's correct or not. She said, what's that? I said, my daddy saw him a long time ago. And I said, my daddy's name is JD. He wanted me to know that. I suspected it for a long time, but now I actually know. I said, so I appreciate your honesty and your integrity, and we're going to take care of the rest of these little problems you got here and solve that. You won't need your therapist for anything else concerning this phenomenon. I promise you. I can handle that. And so did, and everything went fine up there. It was wonderful. But that particular entity, this stuff has been going on with our family for a long, long time. And I suspected this for a long time, that my father had been involved. And he never would tell anybody. these little tiny hints. But then when she described the name and everything and some of the other features, I knew it was my dad. I knew that for a fact. In fact, when they came into my room when I was 17, they kicked the door in. We lived in an old Army barracks that was remodeled. It still had the old Army doors on. That's the Army doors with the square locks that are about that big. They're just old ancient locks you see in the old Army barracks. That door was kicked so hard that it broke the lock. The lock fell on the floor. The next morning, my mom and dad were in the next room. I mean, several feet away. And they never heard a thing, nothing. And the next morning, my dad got up, the very first thing. I'm sitting there looking at the lock on the floor and everything. My dad, I knew he'd be furious when he saw the door was broke. And all he did was look at me and said, "You sure hard on these doors, aren't you, boy?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he left and went to work. And that it was like programming. He never said another word about it. And that was very important because one of the apps that they download in you is to destroy, ignore, or to hide your own evidence. And that was his way of not noticing, not knowing. And you have until you see these profundities. And I'll give you one last example because this is the big one. A friend of mine recently called me. It's not months ago for sure, but she called me and said, crying, and she's, "Oh my God, Derrel, you got to come help me." I said, "Okay, I'm here for you. What do you need?" "You know my favorite horse." I said, "Yeah, your horse." I remember his name and all that. And he was mutilated. I said, "Oh my God, that's horrible." And she said, "Oh, I want you to come investigate." And I said, "Well, great. When did this happen?" She said, 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, and you're calling me 2 weeks later to investigate a cattle mutilation case. I said, "This is the most unusual mutilation case I've ever heard of." She said, "Why?" I said, "Because they brought your horse back alive after it was mutilated. It's never even been heard of in annals of ufology. It's that new. And you're calling me 2 weeks late." I said, "It's an app that's been it's a program downloaded you. One of the big apps that they downloaded in us is to destroy, ignore, or hide your own evidence." I said, "You did a great job of it. Thanks for contacting the veterinarian and all these other people and not contacting me at all until 2 weeks after the body was buried. You see anything wrong with this story?" She said, "Well, I should have called you right away." I said, "Isn't it curious that you didn't? Why do you think that is?" I don't know why I do that. Why? "Do you have any idea?" I said, "Yeah, I do. It's just a program they run on us." And I said, "I have a box full of evidence." I said, "I should have a truckload of it. You know why I don't have the truckload? Is because abductees destroy, ignore, or hide their own evidence. It's a program that's run on them, and they do this automatically. And I see it all the time, and you're just another one that's running the program. That's all there is to it. Most important mutilation case in the history of animal mutilations, and you call me 2 weeks late. We're best friends. Is there something wrong with that story?" She said, "I can't believe I did that." And I said, "Well, I can because it's an app." I said, "That's the way it works." So I see this stuff all the time. And if you can connect the dots in that sense, you can be amazed at, I guess I should tell you one last thing about my daughter-in-law. One night while she was there, before they took the implant out of her ear, when she first moved in with us, fleeing Brazil to get away from the alien, she said she got real nervous, and she said, "There's something that bothers me." I said, "What's that?" She said, "I get real scared once a year." She said, "Every year on this time on the third month, third day, etc." And I said, "Okay, your magic number is 333. I said, "Everybody's got one." I said, "Mine's 111. She said, "What does that mean to you?" I said, "Well, I was born on 111. And I said, "These are just programs." I said, that people don't understand them. They try to make it mysterious or make it something else because they don't have an answer for it, so they just make them up, or make it psychic or whatever. But I said, the point is that she said, but Derrel, they're coming. And I said, okay. And I said, and anyway, they had, excuse me, let me back up. They came the next day she was crying, and she told me that about the three, that they come in threes. And I said, okay. So they came last night. She said, yes. She said, the alien came through the wall, and she said, I picked up a piece of firewood, and like I was going to hit him, and she said, he backed off and got away from me. He said, it scared me half to death. I was shaking. And but they're going to come 2 more times. I said, well, great. I said, this is really important. I said, I would like to do some experimentation with that. And I did. The second experiment I did, I said, I will be up and I'll be waiting when they get here. And she said, okay. And anyway, long story short, I thought, they're coming 3 times. I should experiment with this. I got 2 times here. I should do something spiritual, and then do something physical or something that lasts. You see, you got 3 shots. I've already missed one. You don't want to mess this up. So anyway, I prayed about it and got this tremendous peace that passed all understanding. It's okay. Go to bed. And that's not okay. So I did. Next morning, we got up and she was crying. And I said, you said you were going to be up here. And I said, I did. I did say that. I absolutely did say that. I didn't do it. I said I would, and I didn't. I didn't. I got another piece of information that I thought was valuable, and I messed up. And she said, no, I'm not upset at you. And I said, well, why are you crying? She said, I'm happy. I said, explain this to me. We're having a problem understanding this. And she said, the alien came through the wall again. I picked up a piece of stove wood again, like I was going to hit him. And she said, something so horrific came through the wall. She said, I thought the alien was as bad as it gets. She said, I didn't have a clue. I'd never seen anything like that. And she said, when it came through the wall, I was shaking so bad I dropped the firewood. And the alien felt comforted because of the other being that was there. And I said, and then what happened? She said, I wondered, where are you at? Where, you said you were going to be here. And I said, yeah, I did say that. I did. And she said, the most incredible thing happened. You got to understand, she is not a quote unquote really religious person at all. And she said, an angelic being came through the wall. I said, what happened then? She said, the 2 entities, the horrible one and the alien, couldn't get out of there fast enough. Does that give you a hint that there might be a difference in entities here? There may be something else going on we don't know about. She said, yeah. And I said, well, I promise you this. Tomorrow night's number 3. I said, I will be there. I promise you I will be present. I don't care what message I get. She said, okay. At 2:45 in the morning, she sets up, breathing real heavy and scared, just shaking. I said, it's okay. I'm here. Don't worry. I am here. And I'm sitting there with my Japanese sword. It's had over $1,000 work done on the blade alone. It's sharp enough you could shave with it. And I said, go back to sleep. It's okay. I'm here. She lays back down, goes instantly to sleep. At 3 o'clock in the morning, I mean, exactly at the time every night, same thing. She sat up in slow motion and looked at me, not scared. And she said, they know you're here. I said, yes, I know that. But now they know that I know that they know that I know that I'm here. And one of these days, somebody's going to get stupid enough or brave enough step on the other side of that wall and find out what this existence is kind of like in 3D. I said, there are other things that we know and do. I said, but I wanted them to see the 3D version of this first. And anyway, I said, they doesn't matter. I said, they're not coming. I said, it's okay. I'll stay here with you. Don't worry about a thing. And they never came that night. But anyway, the long and the short of that story is simply that several events happened in her home. That event, and then later the implant they removed from her ear. But you will never convince her of that MIBs don't exist, the alien doesn't exist. She fled Brazil to get away from the alien, thinking if I get away, they'll never follow me. They will. And then the other being that she saw, she said, I had no idea there were things like that out there. Not even alien, that were just stronger and mightier than them and could protect them. And she said, then I had no idea that an angel could show up and scare them off. And I said, well, there's a hierarchy to all this stuff. And I said, it's just a lot that it's just not discussed in the UFO world. And in a lot of realms, I guess, because there's just a lot of information we don't have about it. So it's just pretty much a toss-up. People do all kinds of things like surround themselves on the white light and all these different things. And it's whatever floats your boat. If that helps you out, go ahead and do it. Sprinkle some iron around you or salt or whatever. I said, people use all kinds of things. But the fact is, I said, there are things you can do to protect yourself. And it's called self-defense. This is just some of them.
So how long is it going to take before you finish your upcoming book, your second? It's your second, right?
I'm working on, the second book is on implants. I've already done that one. They're both uploaded on Amazon.com. Anyone can download them. I'm putting them also in a ebook form. I think those are ready. If not, they will be in a day or so. And an ebook, and I've got a third book coming out that I'm going to have done before I get to Manchester, and it's about the invisible implants. Everybody talks about the actual alien implants. I said, the fact is, I get all these people that write me and tell me, well, you want us to tell you about what the alien implants are really about. I said, well, please help me out here. I need all the help I can get. And they'll give you these really oddball, abstract ideas about it's this or it's that and so on and so on. Most of which is just not accurate, not true anyway. And they'll tell me that the implant means this and it does that. And I said, well, that sounds good. But one of the problem is that none of the implant research we have so far verifies your claims. Perhaps you've got medical or scientific evidence that verify your claims we don't know about. Please let me know. I'll be glad to review it any day. Fire away. I said, our work's been studied at Stanford University, MIT, Constellation Laboratories, York University, and a host of other places, including the Royal Society of Chemical Engineers. I think we're on pretty solid ground here. I think we're all right. So I think my conclusions are at least reasonable and have definitely been peer reviewed. I said, now I'm going to talk about, what I'm going to present at Manchester is that most people think they understand the alien implant. I said, I think I'm going to show you that they don't. I said, everybody thinks the alien implant is the object inside the biology. I said, that's what they think. That is not nearly as important as the biology is. Because the biology is the mechanism by which it did what it did. I said, in fact, if you look at yourself, I spoke to 250 surgeons at the John Muir Medical Hospital in 1994 on medical complications of alleged human-alien contact. And in that presentation, an AMA-sponsored program for continuing education for these doctors, I said, the biology, and I said the same thing to NIDS, and I said the same thing to the rest of these people. You need to pay attention to the biology. I told NIDS, I said, you guys, the reason you want to pay for this $22,000 study is because you want to find out if the metals are extraterrestrial or not. That's really what you want to know. I said, I already know the answer to that. I could have, all you had to do is ask me. I said, you have to have that proven in a laboratory, substantiated and verified, quantified, and that you do. I get that. I said, but you're missing the whole point. You need to, if you're going to look at the metals as the importance, you need to do isotopic ratio studies so that you can find out where they came from. Well, why do we need to do that, Derrel? I said, because I'm the alien hunter. I hunt them that hunted me and later hunted my son, and they're probably hunting your children right now. And I want to know all about them. I want to know where they're from. I want to know every detail. I want to know about their biology. I want to know everything about them. I said, and the point is that if I know where the metals come from, and I have the radioisotopes, the phone calls, so to speak, the phone number where those metals come from, I'll have an idea where they're mining or where they're staying. I said, I have a pretty good idea now, but I said, the point is you don't, and that's why you need to know it's extraterrestrial. To you, that proves it's alien. I said, you're so far, you're 15 years behind where we're at. 15 years. Because you're asking all the wrong questions. We're going to study those metals. You're not going to find out much of anything except that they're rare metals from outer space, and you're going to miss the whole point. What's that? The biology. I said, what I told these 250 surgeons is one of these days, I said, these implants we're looking at, a lot of them are passé, they're old. They're, in my opinion, antiquated, leftovers. They're rare anyway. I said, the best biology they're going to get to do, and they'll get around to that eventually, is you. You're the best biology they can get. And last thing I'll say in reference to this is, when we were writing the book on implants, my co-author on it, she's a surgical nurse, Pat Gray, she said, we need a good zinger for this chapter on implants. And I said, okay. I said, here's a good zinger for you. Do aliens have implants? She said, that's incredible. What a great title for the chapter. Wow. She said, do they? I said, sweetie, aliens are implants. They are a collection of implants to do exactly what you're supposed to do. This is to convince you, these particular guys, to convince you they're aliens from other planets. Now, there may be aliens from other planets out there. I hadn't met everybody. I don't know. But I met these guys. And they're a far cry from anything that's alien from another world. There are just too many evidences to point to the uniqueness of why they're here and what they're about and what they're doing. And I said, I just think we're off base, and I'll be presenting some of that information in my presentation. And what I'll be presenting in Manchester is the other half of the story, what you missed on alien implants, the biology. And then I'll talk about the real biology, you, the electrical idle processor that's been wandering around here, listening to a bunch of idiots that say you're barely higher than pond scum. Really? If I'm barely higher than pond scum, why is somebody coming a long, long way from a galaxy far, far away to study pond scum? I wonder. I said, the fact is there's nothing like you in the universe. Nothing. And somebody's come a long way to exploit that. And I think that's fascinating. That gives us another way to look at things. And the last thing I'll do is tell them about the brand new book that I'm working on right now, where I'll be talking about the invisible implants, what they look like, what they do, and the fact they are detectable. And anyway, that's going to be my zinger, so to speak, for Manchester.
So when did you say the book you're working on now, how long is it going to take you think?
I'll have it done by the time we get to Manchester. It'll be in an ebook form.
Oh, okay.
It'll be downloadable.
So how many books do you have that are in physical that a person can acquire a physical copy of?
I have two books that are online and on Amazon.com. AlienHunter, the Evidence in Light, which basically shows you how I found my evidence. It gives you kind of a step-by-step thing, how you can find your own evidence. Then the other book is on implants and what we found in the implants, what they were, what everybody thought they were, and what we were supposed to believe they were, and so on. The third book that will come out will be, and it'll be an ebook form. It'll be referred to as the alien apps or alien implants and the invisible implants. And the fact is that these are things that are detectable and are quite remarkable, really. And anyway, there are half a dozen other books that we're working on right now and I've decided to put them in ebook form because I want them downloadable for people to get as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible, and easily as possible, because the more information that's out there, the better it is for people, especially if they get a different spin on things other than, I was abducted by aliens from planets Zeta Reticuli, and they were doing this and they were doing that, and then they showed me a star system, and wow, it was so cool. What if that wasn't even correct? What if what they showed you was something vastly different? There are so many different stories out there and different angles that this stuff can be thought of as, that I like to stick with the best things we can prove. I don't tell people a bunch of stuff we can't prove. I tell them things I already know or already found out, already discovered, or have reasonable proof of. I don't tell people I know all about this and all about that. If I wasn't there, people ask me about, the whistleblowers. I said I was on NBC the other day describing that and telling them why I thought it was good information and why I thought we had failed at it. And said, why did we fail? I said, look, I used to be in the intelligence community. Lying is what we did. Do you think we did a very good job? You're still believing us, so I guess we did. I said, the fact is, I said, you don't need congressmen asking questions of these whistleblowers. If these whistleblowers are real, what you need are ex-intelligence people who have no axe to grind to ask the questions. Trust me, we know where all the bodies are buried. We know the right questions to ask. And I promise you, you'll get a lot better answers if people like us ask the questions and not a bunch of politicians who are trying to get at the bottom of something they don't have a clue about to begin with.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and I would like to ask you a favor. I don't know that you'll give it, but I'd like you to come back sometime. Is that possible?
It is possible. If like I said, I'll be gone off and on for 2 months, 2 back-to-back European tours. I'll be on airplanes during the next 2 months for close to 60 hours. That's just in the air. I'm not going to be really excited about that, and I'm not in first class, so it's not going to be the most pleasant airplane rides I've ever had in my life. But
well, I'm not in a hurry. You come back, 3, 4, 6 months, whenever floats your boat.
Sounds like fun.
All right. I appreciate you coming on the show. It's been a pleasure. You're one of, if not the most fascinating people I've ever interviewed, by far. And let me go ahead and stop the show.
Okay.